Let's take a closer look at the pennant. The most obvious thing about it is that it shows a plan view of the Castillo, suggesting that the pennant might be a map that involves this distinctive landmark. Just above the Castillo, beside the pole, there's a small spherical object that looks like the zero milestone, which we know was not far from the Castillo when the puzzle was constructed. With those two objects identified, we can recognize that the top edge of the red portion of the pennant represents the alignment puzzle from the end of Water Street on the right to the alignment puzzle tree on the left. The tree isn't drawn, but we know that it was just beside the zero milestone, so the left end point just below the zero milestone is perfect. And given that both the alignment tree and zero milestone were immediately beside a street, it's not a big leap to suggest that the top of the pole represents the first block of that street. This relatively clear representation of the alignment puzzle is important for several reasons. First, it's another major clue that assures us that the alignment puzzle has been interpreted correctly. Second, back when the zero milestone was still across the street from the Castillo, this clue would have been sufficient to get us to the zero milestone without our having to spot and properly interpret the other alignment puzzle and zero milestone clues. And finally, this clue suggests that the street represented by the top of the pole is important. We'll get back to that. If that was all there was to the pennant map, that would certainly be enough, but there's much more. The next thing to notice is that the pennant has two distinct sections. The red, blue, and green portion on the left appears to be a triangular pennant-shaped portion, and the yellow, red, and blue portion on the right is long and thin. Let's call that portion the tail. The entire pennant is being whipped around by the wind. If we focus on just the triangular portion, we can imagine pulling the blue and green sections taut. If we did that, it would look something like this. If we return to the 1980 aerial photo and overlay the flattened triangular portion of the pennant, we see that the blue and green sections represent the block of property between Water Street at the top and the waterfront at the bottom, all the way from the Castillo grounds on the left to the back gate of the Mission on the right. In this view, we can appreciate that the top edge of the triangular portion of the pennant represents the extended alignment puzzle from the end of Water Street near the Great Cross to the zero milestone. It makes artistic sense that the property between Water Street and the water would be blue-green, and that the Castillo grounds, where bloody battles were fought, would be red. So what are we to make of the long, thin tail of the pennant? If we return to the aerial map and overlay the large arched portion of the pennant tail here, it appears to loosely represent the path we took through the Mission. Of course, this portion of the pennant, which also represents the scythe of the Grim Reaper and the rear half of a snake, doesn't show every detail of our path through the Mission, but it closely passes the small chapel associated with 3 significant clues, and it has a small blue section right where we cross over water. That's a nice touch. It also gets us within good viewing range of the Father Lopez statue in its original position and the Great Cross. At this point, you can probably guess that the remaining portion of the pennant tail represents our path through the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park. Of course, this portion of the pennant, which also represents the front half of a snake, doesn't represent every detail of our path through the park, but it does closely overlap the spring house with the fountain and the stone cross, the planetarium referenced by the verse, and the burial ground associated with the Timucuan village of Siloy. Stepping back, we can reasonably conclude that the pennant represents a map of the puzzle solution from the entrance of the Fountain of Youth Park to the street beside the zero milestone. Although this map is important as a redundant zero milestone clue, I doubt anyone could have used it to find their way along the puzzle path to the zero milestone. But this pennant map, which includes a representation of the alignment puzzle, can be appreciated in retrospect because it validates the solution up to the zero milestone. It's rock-solid evidence that we are on the right path.